Hey everyone, it's Tim Holtz and I'm here in my studio in Prescott with Scrapbook.com, and I'm really excited because I'm going to kind of take you through the creative process. We've done a lot of videos on talking about the new release products and everything, but I think it's really cool to kind of maybe take something that's finished and really break it apart and kind of show you the process of what I do to put something together. So we're going to start with just a foundation of a burlap panel. And sometimes when you look at a blank burlap panel or canvas, it's kind of intimidating of like where to start. So we're going to turn this into a mixed media fun piece like this. And I'm not going to take you through step by step on how everything's done. I'm just going to break it down into the techniques that I used because you can create your own. And you can see here that I've used a lot of different things. Obviously the burlap, that we've changed the color. We've added some texture and tinted that. We've incorporated one of the found relatives, this is the occasions, and tinted that. Used some of the really cool new Halloween ephemera and collaged that on. Customized some ribbon, and I love these new Halloween adornments. You can see they're just the right size for all of these great little mixed media projects. So let me take you through and kind of break it down some different elements to put this together because it really is easy to do. It is. So we start with the burlap panel, and the great thing about burlap is that it is a natural material, so it takes ink really well. And because it is a textured surface, I prefer to use a sprayable ink or something fluid versus my ink pad, because the ink pad is going to be pretty dry. It's better for stamping and blending, but when you try to go into fabric, an ink pad's really not good. I want something fluid that's going to permeate this. So when you color this, I can just take my distress spray stain and I can spray it directly onto the burlap. You see how easy it takes the ink. It takes it nice. If you want to kind of go a step further and maybe you have a stencil, you can even go in with a stencil and we can spray through that, and you can use different colors if you want through a stencil, but remember your ink sprays of course are going to be translucent, so you want to be careful when you're overlapping color. I couldn't put orange on top of black, so I would use it kind of by itself. So really however you want to start out with the foundation to alter it from plain burlap, just use your distress spray stain and makes it super easy whether you're using a stencil or spraying it directly on top of it. All right, so the next part is of course adding some texture to it. So I'm just using some demo pieces. I'll end up making something finished out of these eventually, but here I've started. I had my black stain. I wanted to make sure that that was dry first, so I just used a heat tool to quickly dry it. And I wanted to add some words, and here I used one of the layering stencils from Stampers Anonymous. Just use words. It could be any kind of stencil. And I'm going to use Ranger's texture paste. Now the benefit of this texture paste is that it will absorb ink. And so if you're trying a different type of paste, you may want to test it out first because not all embossing paste will absorb a water-based ink. But this one from Ranger is designed to do so. So I'm using a palette knife. I place my stencil down and I'm just going to go in with that paste and I'm kind of pushing it into the stencil and then just lightly skimming the excess off of the stencil. One of the things I always say, a good rule of thumb to follow is if you can't see the design of your stencil, you have too much paste on there. So you want to skip that off so you can see it. Otherwise, if you have too much paste and you lift it up, it will fall into itself. So that's all we've got to do. And then we can lift it off. There you go. You see that. I would just clean this off with water, and same thing, I could scrape the excess back into the jar. Then what you want to do is you want to make sure that your paste is dry. Now for this one, I don't like to use a heat tool to dry this paste. Because it's fluffy, if you use a heat tool, it will actually puff up kind of like marshmallow and lose the detail. So I just use cool air. You can use a fan, ceiling fan, or just let it air dry. It should take maybe about 10 to 15 minutes for that to dry. So this stuff up here is already dry, and I'm just going to show you what you can do with this. I like to use this as a background. So when I'm putting the paste through, I'm not really particular of getting like all the letters or parts and pieces that come off because, again, remember the finished piece, we're covering a lot of this up. So it's just a background. So once this is dry, I am going to go in with my ink pads this time. And the reason is this will allow me to blend my colors. Because if I use spray inks at this point, it's going to get everywhere. But my ink pads, because they're drier ink, is going to give me a lot more control for color. So I've got my mini blending foam tucked under there. Just going to take this, ink this up, and all I need to do is just tap that over the top, and look how easy that is to tint this. It's really that simple, and I could go in with different colors. And because I started with a black background, I'm not worrying about any excess ink that might kind of go off of that paste. Here we'll take a little bit of Twisted Citron. I like that. But see, this is what makes using the ink pads and the blending tool really fun, is because see how I'm able to really get that transition of color on there and use different colors on that paste. And again, that texture paste from Ranger is designed to take water-based inks. And that's what's really cool. So whether it's using distress or dilutions or anything that's a favorite, but look at that, really easy and makes everything pop. Cool background. So that's how we alter the burlap with a color, and that's how we add texture. So now we'll talk about some of the elements that we're going to use. So our background, if I'm going to collage any of these elements, here I just used the ephemera from Ideology. This is all of that really great, cool Halloween ephemera pack, but it could be anything that you have. It could be scraps of paper or washi tape or anything like that. And what I glue this with to the surface is using multi-medium. Whenever you're doing a collage, you want to use a very heavy bodied adhesive that's really going to hold this on and not be absorbed. And what's nice about multi-medium, especially the matte, is that when you glue it on, you add some glue to the bottom, you stick it down, you glue over the top, you don't see any of that adhesive. So that's really important, and that's what I did. And I just brushed it on just using a paintbrush to kind of glue that on. Then the focal point, I decided I wanted to use one of these found relatives. Now, this is from the Found Relatives occasion set. So these are all great photos of different occasions throughout the year, things related to camping or Valentine's Day or Easter. And of course, this Halloween one is really fun. These kind of little roughed up boys using, carving their pumpkins or little jack-o'-lanterns. So what I want to do is I want to tint that. And believe it or not, tinting these much easier than you think because I'm just going to use a distress marker. That's all it is. And I'm going to use the brush side because I want something that's going to apply quite a bit of ink to the surface. And I'm just going to go in and add my color first, and you could add as much color in any colors that you want really. So here I'm just going to work that in, and I want to give that ink just a little bit of time to absorb into the paper. This is still a coated paper. And then I take a very fancy tool. We're just going to use a cotton swab, and I'm just going to burnish that in. Because remember, that coated paper is only going to absorb so much of the ink. And if you want this more intense, we can go back and add another layer. But you just need to work that right in. And it's that simple to tint that. Pretty easy. It's done. It's ready to go. So you can add some remnant rubs. Here I went and added some rub-ons on the top of this, but I just glued that on, and that became kind of my focal point piece. Then another thing I did is create some custom ribbon. And this is really nice, especially when you want to really dress up a holiday project. So here I went in with this is the Ideology crinkle ribbon. And this is a little different than seam binding ribbon. This has a much heavier body to it, so it's going to hold its shape, but also holds that crinkle, and it takes ink really well. Now, normally I would work on a non-stick craft sheet for this, but because of the reflection in the camera, we're just working on a piece of scrap paper. So if you have your craft sheet, really use that. It's going to be so much easier to do. So I'm going to take the brush side of my marker, and I'm just going to lay that, and I'm just going to go right along the edge of my ribbon. And I'm not being careful. I'm not trying to draw a perfectly straight line. You can see I'm just skipping it across. But if you have some system, that's great. And I'm just going to color that. That's just using a little bit of orange, that's spice marmalade. And then I'm going to go onto the other side. We're going to take black soot. And it doesn't matter which side of the ribbon you color. And I'm just swiping some ink on there. Now the reason I'm using a marker versus an ink pad, because you might think, well, why don't you just use an ink pad? If I use an ink pad, I might get too much ink on here. And so the marker is, again, allowing me to control how much ink and where I place it. So it's really that simple. Then we're going to take the distress sprayer. We're going to spray this. So the cool thing about the sprayer, again, it has that locking trigger. So when it's locked, it's not going to go off in your bag. So you're going to unlock that. And we're just going to spray this ribbon. And this is where that craft sheet comes in handy because it's going to repel the water. But I want to spray that because these inks are going to react with water. And this has a really nice fine mist, you can see. Another cool thing, and this paper is actually going to be cool. If I wanted to create kind of a splattery effect on a background, the reason I designed this sprayer is if I slowly squeeze the trigger, see those little speckles that I get? That's how I can create those drips of water using the same. So I either give it a really nice mist or slowly squeeze it to get that speckly look. But here by misting this ribbon, see how my inks just start to blend in there? And then I'm going to go in and dry it. I'm just going to use a heat tool. You could let this air dry as well, but I really prefer when it comes to crinkle ribbon to dry it with a heat tool because it kind of freezes the color where it is. And what's nice about using this as well is this is heat stable, this ribbon. So you don't have to worry about it melting or burning or smoking. And you can use any type of heat tool for this. And you're just going to dry that ribbon. And I like to crinkle it because I want to keep that textured effect. But if you didn't want it to be wrinkled, you could dry it flat and it would in fact dry completely smooth and flat. And once that's dry, you could go in with your blending tool. You can add a little bit more ink or color to it if you choose. But you can see here that we've made a really cool blended Halloween ribbon that we just tied onto the project. So basically, taking all those different techniques, you can create a mixed media piece like this in no time, just by coloring the burlap with any type of spray ink. I used Distress Spray Stain. Then we went in with the texture paste, let that dry, and then add some color with the mini Distress inks and a blending tool to create kind of that pop of color in the background. Took some multi-medium and some ephemera and quickly added some accent pieces. Remember to use our photo. We just tinted that with the distress markers, as well as customize our ribbon with distress markers as well. And then just adding your charms. So sometimes when you look at projects like this that are layered, you think they're really intimidating, but when you break it down by the simple techniques, super easy to do. So just have fun creating any of your seasonal mixed media projects.